Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special Q&A video for NUTMEG. My name is Chris. I'm from the Secret Mode team working on NUTMEG, and I have a very special guest. Jacob, are you happy to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jake Habgood, and I'm the Game Director on NUTMEG.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thanks so much. So, so a bit more background about this video before we get into it. So as we end 2025 and we're kind of heading in towards the year of launch for NUTMEG, which is very, very exciting, we wanted to do kind of a bit of a retrospective on how things have gone so far with the game since its announcement, and even a bit earlier than that, probably within development. Specifically, we wanted to focus a bit as well on the community involvement in the game, which has been a huge part of things in recent months, in terms of kind of, gathering feedback and helping kind of implement some positive changes, which has been really cool. We even have some questions today that have been submitted by the NUTMEG community and our playtesting community, which is fantastic. So with all of that said and done, we'll get into all of that in a second. But first, to the uninitiated, Jacob, would you maybe give the elevator pitch or tell us what NUTMEG is all about for anybody who might be unaware?
So NUTMEG is a retro football management game set in the 1980s, runs through till just before the millennium, gives you the ability as a manager to pick your team, take them through that time period and build a world-class winning team by the end of the game. And
I'm still yet to achieve that. I'm doing okay in my playthrough so far. I'm starting some wonderful players, but reaching the pinnacle, I'm going to get there. And that's on me. That's on me. I need to learn. I need to improve. Brilliant. So you mentioned Sumo Digital Academy. Could you maybe give a bit of an insight into that team in terms of how many people are working on the game, and that kind of slightly different. It's not your average dev team, right? It's a slightly different approach, and so maybe a bit of a background on that, and also maybe the size of the team that's working on NUTMEG.
Yeah, so I mean, the original idea behind NUTMEG came when Secret Mode approached us after having done a sort of marketing game that we did for you guys for Still Waits the Deep, a game called Oil Strike 75. And that was very much set in a sort of retro era. So the idea of an 80s football management game was something that we were really passionate about. Dave, the Academy's art director, did some great work bringing the 80s sort of manager's office to life, and that included this initial idea of using a card game to resolve the matches. So that's sort of where it started. Over the period of the game, all 15 of the last sort of cohort of apprentices have worked on this as a project, but there's currently 8 programmers and 3 artists working on the game. All the programming team either were Academy apprentices or are Academy apprentices, and both of the sort of leads in art and programming were the Academy trainers who actually trained those apprentices in the first place. But then, we've also got people from Sumo Sheffield, so our audio director and our production team come from Sumo Sheffield and sort of add that seasoned art team as well, who remember the 80s, and has really helped us nail that look of the game.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, small but perfectly formed, I think is a nice way to sum up maybe the Sumo Digital Academy team. So yeah, you mentioned about the kind of retro focus of NUTMEG, which is a huge aspect of the game, which is great. We've also mentioned it being kind of a more a card game basically, so that's a key aspect of it if folks haven't seen that yet. It's all about building a deck and using that as basically your tools and your abilities as a manager to kind of turn matches in your favor, and you do that in all kinds of different ways. Was there ever one of the questions from our playtesting community was there ever a temptation to go to maybe a more of an arcade style of game for football, rather than it kind of be this kind of football management simulator kind of thing? But yeah, it's a good question from the community of, was there ever a temptation to move towards more of an arcade thing when you also kind of combine the card building or the card playing element of it, or were you always set in this kind of system and format that NUTMEG currently is?
So, I mean, the brief was always to make a football management game. But nonetheless, at the start of the project, we had different groups of apprentices making different prototypes. And there were certainly some that were a bit more sort of Marvel Snap. But I think ultimately we decided we wanted to stay true to that football management game brief. I think for us, there's something very nostalgic that fits with the era and everything about playing football management games and being able to sort of build a team in that time era that we just really loved. And we didn't want it just to be about the football card game.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. So there's a lot of inspiration or kind of references or things that you would spot, Easter eggs and things like that. If you know you're kind of not just your football of that era of the 80s and 90s, but generally that culture of especially British culture around that time. I guess my question is, a question that came from our playtesting community was, are there any kind of specific inspirations that you can pull from or source material that you seem to find the team is always kind of pulling from that was an inspiration for the aesthetic and the approach of the game? We talk about things like panini stickers and all that kind of stuff and giant telephones and things like that. Were there anything, you got anything to hand or anything that always seems to be something that you pull from as a reference for NUTMEG?
Well, I think one of the central sort of inspirations behind the aesthetic was actually teletext. Teletext is such an anchor for that time period. Anybody who's there will remember it, and the color schemes and the look. It just sort of instantly transports you back to that time period. So a lot of it built around that. I think in terms of gameplay, obviously, we played football management games back in the day. Personally, sort of Premier Manager was a game I played and worked on one version at Gremlin. But it's also games like things like Inscription. I think that as a card game, as a roguelike card game, was quite inspiring to the team. And ultimately, I think we were trying to create something that was fit for a modern audience of gamer who perhaps doesn't have as much time to play football management games as they might have when they were younger. We were keen to make the whole game fit into that sort of 90-minute playing session, the whole season. Yeah,
it's this really interesting mix now, NUTMEG, of it's got that depth in terms of what you put into it, you can get out of it in terms of how you adjust your management of your squad or your club, but also there's the ability, which maybe other management games don't have, of we can move through this actually quite quickly compared to maybe other titles. So it's kind of up to the player in a lot of ways in terms of how you choose to kind of progress through the game, which is super cool. So and that's been a really interesting conversation point through like playtester feedback that we've received and how folks are kind of experiencing the game and whether they're choosing to go into granular detail and do everything, or they just want to blast through seasons and get to the top. So it's been really interesting to kind of go back and forth on that. And as well, kind of leading into my next question, we focused a lot in the early goings when we did play tests with our community around the early kind of aspect of the game. The game is basically set from 1980 to 1999, right? And the game will begin in 1980. So a lot of things that we may have shown and previewed up to this point are in that kind of era of 1980, and the aesthetic matches that. So teletext is one thing you mentioned, but there's loads of other things you'll spot in the game that take you to that era of 1980. However, that changes, doesn't it? So the more that you play and progress and go through time, the game changes with you and makes adjustments based on that as well, doesn't it? Can you maybe shed a bit more light on, as we get to show off more of the game and folks get really stuck into it, how the game kind of transforms visually to kind of match that passage through time?
Yeah, I guess for those of us that were there in the 80s, you still had the remnants of the 70s there. One of the things I really love about the game is if you catch a look at the floor and get the carpet, that carpet is so from the 70s. But all of these things, the wallpaper, the technology on the desk, it's all updating as you go through the game. So you start off with this sort of IBM green screen PC, and then by the mid-90s, it's sort of upgraded to something that's a bit more window based, and it's got some curved lines to it. The television's always updating, the telephones are updating. Mid-90s, you've got some really terrible wallpaper that sort of creeps in as well. So I think, for those of us that was there, it would just make you smile. But there's also, there's all these news and entertainment stories coming through on the teletext that just sort of, remind you of what was happening in that year. And you've got tweaks to the music throughout, so you will get music that's appropriate not just to the sort of area you're at. So when you're sort of at the television console, it sounds a bit more sort of video game console like, but as time goes on, you get those sort of 90s themes coming into the music as well. So I think it's really nice in terms of how it represents time.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking forward to being able to show off more of that and get some feedback from our testers and beyond of how they kind of enjoy that kind of transformation. I think it's going to be really cool to see. So going into a bit more detail on kind of different areas of development of the game. So throughout recent months, when we've been going through our playtesting period for NUTMEG. So for those who might be unaware, we've been working with an exclusive group of kind of behind closed doors playtesters, members of the community who reached out when we announced the game and expressed their interest to be involved in playtesting and playing early versions of the game and giving their feedback and helping kind of implement change. And that's been going on from time of recording now for the best part of 6 months, right? So already a large period of time that we've had to show early versions of the game to folks, see what they think about it, gather feedback, and then combine it with our own internal feedback and goals, and decide how we want to proceed. So I guess there's different areas of the game that have been touched on in that way over recent months. I guess maybe there are things around like the card playing aspect of the game, right? We've tweaked that in a lot of different ways over time, whether it's like the boost cards and how they're implemented, or when you receive them, how you receive them. Anything maybe you can share just quickly on that aspect of the game and the card playing, and maybe how that's been tweaked in recent months?
Yeah, so I guess when we started the game, the card game was not as central a focus as it is now. The card game was really just trying to sort of tell the story of the match, be a replacement for those kind of screens you'd see in football management games where it just sort of showed you how many goals were scored by each side, really. I think as time's gone on, we've realised the potential of that as something that is really engaging, that gives you a lot of control over those card games that you play, but also allows you to sort of develop your strategies through the deck that you have access to, through your staff and your team, and the cards that it allows you to create. So I think the balance of that is something that's really helped through the playtesting. We've introduced a tactical deck, which is sort of giving you cards in every match that correspond to the formation and the kind of tactics that you're applying in that particular game. So if you're pushing forward and you're playing a 4-3-3, then you're going to get very attack-oriented cards in your tactical deck, and that goes halfway towards giving you what you need for that next match. But you've still got to create your deck sort of outside of that, using your team and your staff to give you the power in the game.
Brilliant. Again, and it's that aspect of if you kind of put the time in to understand how it works and use it correctly, you get that reward of the right cards, or getting close to the right cards to help kind of turn things in your favor in a match, which is really cool. The other thing I was going to mention, or I'd love to maybe shout about very briefly, and because we touched on it just recently, was the ways to play and progression. So that's been a big thing that I know yourself and the team have been really focused on, and it's been influenced in a way by playtester feedback. We've mentioned this on Steam. We basically now have 2 different ways to play the game, right? To progress through. You've got the ability to, classic kind of sports game management style, play through every game, focus in, be on the touchline for everything, and try and influence every single match. Or you can move things forward a little bit faster if you want to go through that journey of the game a little bit quicker, but we're still having an influence on results. Could you maybe shed just quickly a little bit more light on those 2 different ways to play?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, like we said before, we'd always had this idea that this could be a game that you could play in sort of a much shorter playing session than the typical football management game. So getting through a whole complete season in 90 minutes effectively means that you can only really play about sort of 1 in 5 matches over the course of a season. The way we've sort of represented that in the game is to have this idea of a broadcast mode. So you're choosing which of the matches, which of the fixtures in the current month you want to be broadcast on TV, essentially. And then the one that's broadcast on TV is the one you're taking control of and you have the most influence over. And the other matches are sort of resolved based on the stats of your team, so it's still, based on the team you've hired and how you put them together, but they happen instantly and you get the results. That means you can have a sort of 90-minute season, and within that, you only really need to sort of start to think about those key matches, those key 6-pointers, where the team that you're going to end up finishing close to is going to lose 3 points and you're going to gain 3 points. And I think that allows you to have a really great strategy through that kind of game. But equally, we appreciate that some people want to play every single game, and the game shouldn't stop you from doing that. And you can do that for every game, play through every game, and then gives you sort of a chance to sort of control every aspect of the match for every single game of the season. Nonetheless, I think even if you're playing it that way, eventually you sort of reach a point where there are some matches you just realize, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm near the top of the table. What's the point of spending 10 minutes playing this match against the person at the bottom? So I think we found that often the sort of way that people play the game do converge a little bit, so that actually people start off playing it in one or the other way, but the way they're playing it by the end is actually quite similar.
Yeah, you end up seeing the benefits of the other way to play, right? And you pick and choose based on your own experience and how your playthrough is going, right? Good to have that option, I think, is the key thing, right? So that's really cool.
Definitely.
Okay, so one kind of a general. We've talked a lot about the playtesting community and how it's been super kind of interesting to work with that community in recent months. And I guess to kind of as a finalized point, just a general question to you of like how important and how useful has this process been in terms of gathering feedback from real players who are experiencing the game for the first time, unbiased point of view, who have expressed their interest in these kind of games, whether it's football management games or sports games or card playing games or roguelikes, whatever it is, and gathering that feedback and factoring that into the changes that you've been making recently. Just any general thoughts on how useful or interesting that's been?
Both extremely useful and extremely interesting. I mean, I think as a development team, it's very hard sometimes to get a perspective on what you're doing. I mean, I suppose a great example would be the way that we represented stamina in the game. So, early on, we created this, what we thought was a really cool feature, which was that as the players get tired, their cards become more crinkled and damaged. And we thought, oh, brilliant. This is an amazing way of representing stamina. It looks great. Everybody's going to love it. But actually, it didn't really communicate that as well as we thought it would. And ultimately, the feedback from the audience was able to tell us that, no, people weren't getting this and that they needed something a bit more traditional on the cards that would show them, exactly what the stamina rating was, color code it, et cetera, et cetera. So we refined that and we made it a lot better as a result. And I think sometimes you just need that. You need somebody outside of the team who's, not got any kind of previous connection with it, just point out the obvious, and those changes can be made.
Yeah, those fresh sets of eyes have been super helpful, and the general concept and the general approach of the game has been received incredibly well by the playtesting community. And it's just more, like you said, it's those specific things that, actually this is how they're reacting to this thing that we've changed, or this is the perception of it that we might not have expected, like stuff like that. Yeah, it's been incredibly useful to see and cool to have that conversation with the team about how we then action those feedback points. It's been really cool to go through that process, and that's going to continue as we're going through a couple more playtest periods and things like that as we work towards launch in 2026. So that's great. And as kind of a final kind of thank you and kind of call out to the playtesting community, we're going to finish with a couple of questions that they submitted as well. So the first one was really interesting one, actually. So obviously not every feature or idea for the game makes it into a final version. So in a perfect world, so unlimited time, no restrictions on your for your team, are there any features that you would have particularly really loved to add, like galaxy brain kind of stuff that you wish, if we had $20 million we would have put this in? Anything like that for NUTMEG?
I mean, I think one of the things that the team is still hoping we have time to add is some sort of end game sequence. And I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but we've got some really exciting ideas for what might happen at the end of the game. Once you've reached the end of the time period of the game, which is sort of up to the year 2000, and how we'd represent that to the player. So that's quite exciting. I mean, there's loads of other little things as well that we've had in various prototypes on the way. Sort of silly things like dog on pitch. Streakers, I suppose, was another 80s thing. But some of these things haven't made it into the game at this point. Maybe we'll have time, maybe we won't have time. But I think some of the humour would be great to get in there if we have time.
there's already plenty of humor. I mean, I think that's one of the charming things about the game, and we get that feedback from folks too, whether it's the kind of the tone of voice that you're kind of spoken to when you're kind of going through like the tutorial side of things, which feels very kind of off the cuff and very 80s, very kind of crass in some ways, or whether you're checking out some games on your PC and things like that. There's plenty of humor already, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we can implement in terms of that end of game stuff to conclude your journey, which is really, really cool. I guess on a very similar point, and you talked about maybe a couple of them as examples, but maybe are there any other elements of football that you would have liked the idea of including that just maybe based on the scope of the game or how it works, you didn't get the chance to include? So examples were given of like offside trap or more set piece options or something like that. Is there anything that, further down the line, maybe one day we do that kind of stuff and it's kind of on the back burner as like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could add something like that?
Yeah, it's funny, reading this question reminded me that we did have an offside card in the original prototype. So when the opposite team had scored a goal, if you had this card, you could actually get it offside. So that might be a nice thing to reintroduce. Actually, I mean, I've actually spoken to the team to see whether that still exists in the background somewhere, so we could re-enable it. But we've discussed offside trap. A bit complicated in terms of setting that up with multiple players to fit into the sort of card game mechanic. But we certainly do have lots of different specific plays later in the game that people will be able to discover and try out for themselves. So, it's not just Route 1 football throughout the entire game. Once you get to sort of the mid-early 90s, there are some interesting new tactics out there and some specific plays you can make. So I'll leave those for people to discover for themselves.
I'm looking forward to it. Even with the demo that came out recently, I think gave some good examples of that, of how the tactics you can deploy or cards you can receive can kind of inspire very different styles of play, which is really cool. So, and you're almost implementing kind of a philosophy or a tactical plan based on your team, but also the kind of cards that you get and how you get those. So, yeah, that's really, really cool. Based on offsides and things like that. Maybe we should have a modern day NUTMEG where we have VAR or something like that. Or maybe that's terrible. That's why I'm not a game designer. That's a terrible decision. Let's not do that. That's not good at all. Brilliant. Okay, that's all the questions that we had. Really, really good to chat with you, Jacob, and talk about lots of different things as we kind of end 2025 with NUTMEG and look ahead to our year of launch, and also kind of give a huge shout out to our playtesting community and appreciate them for their support and feedback up to this point. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Please keep in touch across all Secret Mode channels for more news on NUTMEG as we head towards launch, as we mentioned, and more opportunities to check out the game in different ways. We can't wait to share more on that. So for now, thank you so much for watching. Jacob, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.